Aloha. My name is John Hart. Thank you for joining us back at the 2023 POW conference. I'm the moderator for this morning's sessions titled Communication, the Best Management Practices. And that is in quotes, the best management practices. The session is being streamed concurrently on our virtual platform. At the end of the presentation, Barry is going to have some time on this session to take some questions if you have any, and those virtually, please submit your questions online. I'd like to introduce Barry, which I didn't get a chance to do earlier because I knew we were holed up on time. Barry is a stormwater and sustainability professional who supports infrastructure development at the intersection of built and natural environments. Barry's expertise is based on decades of experience, and some of this that I've had the opportunity to work closely with him on some clients on the mainland. But his experience managing, the infrastructure, promoting environmental responsibility in transportation, renewable energy, and urban environments. Barry and his wife, Tracy, formed Fagan Consulting, LLC in 2022 to further their mission of helping good people deliver livable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure. Please help me welcome Barry Fagan.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I also want to apologize for going over this morning and not leaving any time for questions. I was thinking a 1 hour session, prepared my talk on that, and then realized 45 minutes, and then read over John's moderator script and it said leave time for questions. And so I didn't do any of that. I apologize. So if you have any questions, we will have some time today. If you have any questions left over from this morning, I'd be happy to take those now or take those later. Happy to do that. So a couple of things I didn't mention this morning that maybe you need to be aware of if you haven't already picked up on it, but I suck at communication. And if you don't believe me, you can ask my wife, but I struggle, and I'm not joking. I struggle. It's a skill to learn how to give presentations. That's something that anyone can do. And with enough practice, you can look like you're comfortable, but I'm never comfortable up here. It's anxiety promoting, and sometimes I stutter, sometimes I even spit, and sometimes I struggle to find the right word. And this, believe it or not, is easier than one-on-one conversations sometimes. And I worked for a consulting firm after I left Aldite. I worked for a consulting firm for 5.5 years, and those cold calls were awful. Just to sit down with another human being and tell them how great you are is something that I really struggled with. And I could feel the drop of sweat running down the middle of my back, and it just wasn't a comfortable thing for me. And so you take that personality and then you put them in a position of conflict. I avoid conflict like the plague. So I've taken personality tests. We all have, and they often show up that I'm conflict avoidant, just off the charts. And I remember asking one of the facilitators one time, am I in the wrong business? Because for 20 years, I've been in conflict, it felt like, with contractors, with regulators, with environmental groups, with my own employees. And it's never an easy thing for me. And she was kind and said, no, Barry, actually, we need more people who want to avoid conflict in those times of conflict. Apparently, there's some people out there that enjoy conflict, and they see it as a game, and they don't see it as two humans, trying to solve a problem. And she said, no, the fact that you want to avoid that situation means that you're trying really hard to get to a solution. And maybe we need more people like that, which was nice and kind of her, but still a struggle sometimes to deal with that personality of mine. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't like people. So I'm kidding. Okay, I do like people, but in small doses. These types of events, back home, if I have a big day of conference and people, and I'll get home and my wife will say, "You've used up your words again, haven't you, Barry?" it's true. I've only got so much energy. So I enjoy solo stuff. I'm looking forward tomorrow. I'm going to venture out on this island and have some time before my wife and youngest daughter come in on Thursday. And so I enjoy hiking and paddling and camping by myself. Sometimes I spent 2 nights on this beach just in the middle of nowhere on a wild and scenic river in Alabama, the Escatawpa River. And it was just me and the fish and the birds for a couple of days. And then the alligators on my way out, which were a little bit scary. My mom lives in Tucson, Arizona, and I took my youngest daughter out to see her with my niece, and took them out, and I chose to spend some of my time in the desert. So I spent from Thursday morning till when I was dropped off, I hiked out 8 miles up and into the desert, and I didn't speak to or see another person until Saturday afternoon when I was picked up, and it was fantastic. And so you may wonder, with all my hangups about people and communication, why do I do this? Why? And it's great to be invited to come to Hawaii, and I do appreciate that. But also sign up for this stuff in less attractive places, believe it or not. And part of that is because I think it's important. I think communication is absolutely the best management practice we have available to us in the world of stormwater construction, stormwater post-construction, stormwater, but also in our profession, in our world of protecting the environment, especially the water based environment. Communication is absolutely important and effective, and essential to our doing our work. So we have a new whitewater facility near my house in Montgomery, Alabama. They created a new whitewater park, which is pretty cool. And I've been paddling most of my life and enjoy paddling, but another hang up, I guess it's kind of a therapy session for me, so apologize. But another hang up of mine is being in closed places, being underwater. John was talking about CPAP this morning, and I was getting a little bit anxious about that, just having something over my face. And so I decided, and so kayaking has been a thing I've just stayed away from. I don't like the thought of my legs being pinned inside of a kayak and then this neoprene skirt, locking me in. And I didn't like the thought of it. So I decided I'm going to conquer that fear. I've got this facility here. They have kayaking lessons. It's a controlled environment. I'm going to do it. And so I took some kayaking lessons, and the teacher, it was a one-on-one lesson. And before we even got in the water, I think he knew what he was up against when he handed me the nose clips, which a lot of kayakers wear, nose clip to keep water from going up your nose. And I told him, I don't think I could handle that. Having something, block my airway. And I'm sure he's thinking, buddy, you don't know what you're about to get into. And then I knew what I was up against when he said the whole key to kayaking is being comfortable upside down in the water. And I got to tell you, I'm not there yet. Maybe one day, but just like with kayaking, learning to roll. So I had a good day that first day, came back a second day for the roll lesson. And that skill of learning to roll, it's a technical skill. You got to do about 4 or 5 things at the same time while you're upside down, while you're in the water, while you're Barry Fagan, and get yourself back upright. It's hard, it's essential, and it's a learned skill, just like communication. My daughter, Katie, oldest daughter, Katie, she's a bit of an introvert also, but when she was in high school, we kind of made a pact that, we may have this issue with communication and people, but we can learn a skill. We're smart enough to learn a skill. And so she got better at going to the grocery store and speaking to the person checking her out. And I got better at public speaking. And so it is absolutely a skill that's essential. And we can't make the connection between our environmental responsibilities and our mission if we're not effectively communicating. We can't lay out the 5 pillars of stormwater management if we're not effectively communicating. Our company, our tagline is supporting infrastructure delivery at the intersection of built and natural environments. I can't do that unless I'm an effective communicator. I can't convince a client to hire me unless I'm an effective communicator. And, we've all heard John Maxwell saying that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so we can't manage, we can't lead, we can't function without effective communication. We can function, but we can't function as efficiently and effectively as we want to. And so those are some of the reasons why I choose to get better at communicating, and why we should all get better at communicating. Now let's talk about what am I talking about with this effective communication. It's something that we often, it's hard to know, or hard to say, yeah, that was a really effective interaction. We really communicated well, but we know it when it goes wrong.
Just put me on. On 3 hours. Then it just fired me from the team.
Becky, you and we both know that this marriage has been over for a long, long time.
No, I honestly did not know that.
So have you guys been in those situations where you say, no, I honestly did not know that? And if, I think we all have been in those situations, but when you're in those situations, did you feel like you could say, I honestly did not know that? Or did you have to kind of hide it? And so I'm thinking about I can measure the type of relationship I have with someone if I can say, hey, I didn't know that, honestly, and them be okay with that. And so thinking about your employees, are they okay with saying, I did not know that? Or do they wait till you leave the room and then they figure out, what was he talking about? What was she talking about? So that look on Kyle Naughton's face, if you get that a lot, that's, maybe a reason to kind of stay away from admitting that. So when I was with the Alabama DOT, I helped to start a leadership academy. And once or twice a year, I still teach one of the modules. Typically, I sign up for communication because it's a hard one for me. And one of the quizzes we do, a facilitative quiz, we ask the attendees to rank from 1 to 10. Give these questions a score. And you guys do it right now. Just think about it, jot it down or in your head. Does your organization have a high degree of intentionally open and honest communication? That gets some eye rolls from the ALDOT folks, the intentionally open and honest communication. How about this? Most ALDOT employees understand the importance of effective communication. Do your employees, does your culture support that understanding of the importance of effective communication? ALDOT has a reputation of effectively communicating with the people we serve. So how are you treating the people who pay your salaries would be a good question to ask. Are you, at ALDOT, when I first started, it was, we behaved like the old railroads. We came marching through your ranch, through your property, and regardless of how you felt about it, we appreciated a thank you after we finished our roadway through your project. We really didn't take your view of that roadway into account. How about this? Change at ALDOT or your organization, change is accompanied by ample and effective communication efforts. It's hard to get a big organization to change, regardless if it's DOT or otherwise. And part of the reason is a lack of effective communication. So if you're a manager, if you're a supervisor, and you're jotting down, scoring yourself 0 or 1 to 10, think about that from your perspective, then also think about it from your employees' perspective. Would they grade your work the same way? So this definition of effective communication is one I've carried for years. Effective communication happens when the intended message is received and understood by the intended recipient. So you've got a couple of pieces and parts there to this formula. You have a sender, you have a message, you have a medium that message is being sent across. Then you have a recipient that understands. They understand what's going on. Peter Drucker says that communication is what the listener does, and ideally it's not just that they hear you. That's one component, that they hear you, but they understand you, and then they do something. It's what the listener does. this sign here, that's not off the internet. That was a real sign tacked to one of the right-of-way fences on the project in Alabama. And it was down the slope, probably 200 feet off the edge of pavement, or maybe more, but down a slope through some woods, and then on the right-of-way fence at the discharge point. And this poor property owner, he's speaking, but if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, is communication happening if no one ever reads his sign? No. Fortunately, an inspector got out of their truck and actually was inspecting that day and saw the sign. George Bernard Shaw says that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has already taken place. And I think that's something that we struggle with is we say, hey, I told him, I told her, I told, or did not tell you that what's going on. And so if your employees asked, I'm sorry, if I asked, are you an effective communicator? Most managers, most leaders, most supervisors would say, yes, I am an effective communicator. But then if I went and surveyed your employees, would they say the same thing about you? And survey after survey shows that most managers rate themselves much more highly in the area of effective communication than their own employees do. So it's something to think about, that we're not where we think we are in terms of being effective communicators. I read a book several years ago called Awesomely Simple by this guy, John Spence. He's a business consultant, and he's consulted, worked with, and spoken with thousands of businesses. And he said that most of them struggle with having a lack of open, honest, robust, and courageous communication. And he lists these four areas. Now, this is a business book. It's not a communications book. It's a business and leadership book. But he lists these as the four greatest challenges of any business, and that's lack of a well-communicated vision. And so I've been talking about mission today, and mission and vision are different things. The mission is what you do. We provide a transportation system. Your vision is who you want to be. It's aspirational, and it's something that we say, hey, one day we're going to get there. And so I would encourage you to pay attention to what your vision is. And if you don't have one, create one, whether it's at work for your office or for you individually, or for your program, for your organization, or even for your family. What do we want to be? Again, when McGee is Katie's age, what do we want to be? That would be your vision, and then communicate that. It's not good enough to have me have the vision, but not share it with my employees. If we're going to get there, we all have to be on the same page. Lack of courageous communication. That's a biggie in the DOT world, and at least in my experience. I remember a trip. We were headed over to the EPA region office in Atlanta one day. The transportation director is driving. We're in a Chevrolet Suburban, and people are seated in there in order of, I guess, hierarchy. And I'm in the back seat, of course. And so the director, Mr. Cooper, he said, Barry, have you seen my letter to the Corps yet? And I said no. And so the letter starts being passed back to me. Everyone in that vehicle had seen his letter except for me. And I start reading it, and I said, well, Mr. Cooper, actually, that didn't happen that way. And the Corps really didn't say that. They said this. And I pointed out a couple of things wrong with his letter. And he said, Barry, you're taking all the sting out of my letter. And it bothered me, and he changed his letter, but it bothered me that every one of those people in his inner circle, all the yes people around him, had patted him on the back and said, oh yeah, Mr. Cooper, you go get him. That's a great letter. And it took the flunky in the back to say, hey, that's not what we need to do. And so I guess thinking about who would you want around you if you were the leader? Do you want people only supporting your ideas and saying yes and saying good job? If that's the case, you don't need those people. If we're just going to go with your ideas, or do you want someone to push back every once in a while and give you a different perspective? And that's what courageous communication looks like. Toleration of mediocrity. due to the lack of communication, and I pick on DOTs, but I've learned that really in any large organization, you have the all-stars and you have the slackers. And unfortunately, they're working side by side. They're getting paid the same amount of money, and they're going to get the same retirement, same benefit. All of that is going to be the same in most cases because of a lack of communication. No one is saying, hey, slacker, pick it up. No one's saying, and oftentimes, hey, all-star, keep it up. I had an employee once that, and with the Alabama DOT, the performance appraisals are just kind of something you do once a year. And, hey, Barry, the secretary for the chief engineer calls and says, hey, Barry, I've got your performance appraisal up here ready for you to sign. Walk up there, sign it, go back to my office. That's it. And so with AlDOT, you have to earn a certain score to get to be eligible for a raise for the next year if there's one available. And so everyone gets that score or above. That's just the way it is. And I had an employee once, I figured I learned that I was working harder on his career than he was, and he was not living up to the standards that we had agreed upon, the standards that are associated with his job. So I gave him a 16, and that knocked him out of eligibility for a raise the next year. And he still hasn't forgiven me for that yet, because that's the first time in his probably 22-year career at that point that he had ever been told, hey, you're not doing your job. And so I was working in our construction bureau, and when I left, they gave me a meal and a plaque, and everybody had signed it, and he signed his name and wrote number 16 as if he was a professional player of some sort. But so anyway, that was the first time he had ever been told, you're not doing your job. Poor execution of key plans and ideas due to the lack of communication. We all have great ideas. We all see great ideas, and we whoever comes up with a great idea, we say, that's great, go. And then we don't support them. They don't communicate. They don't, the key ideas and great ideas don't come to fruition. So that's the how and the what. No, that's the why and the what. Now let's talk about how we get there. So I mentioned earlier, John Maxwell, he says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. We can't hope to influence someone that doesn't trust us. And that's, as an organization, where we're trying to increase employee effectiveness. That requires trust in the organization. Client satisfaction, that requires trust in the organization. Growth requires trust. As individuals, or on our projects, we need to be thinking about becoming trustworthy in someone else's eyes. So one thing that I used to encourage AlDOT, no one that matters expects us to be perfect. What they expect us to do is be working toward some of the same things they are interested in. So they want to know that our heart is in the right place. And once you sit down with someone and you figure out, or they figure out, that you care about some of the same things they care about, then they start to see you as human. And so right now you're working for a DOT, or you're working for an airport authority, or whatever your entity is. A lot of times the people who pay your salary, they don't see you as human. They see you as a machine, as a monster sometimes, if you're doing things that they don't agree with. But if you can go sit down with them and share with them, hey, here are our limitations. Here's what we want to be doing. Here's why we can't do what you want to be doing. At least it gives them an opportunity to see you as human. And then once you are seen as human, then you're seen as being capable of making mistakes. And then that's where the grace and understanding comes from. But that takes a while to get there. And we can't hope to influence anyone that we're not willing to hang out with. And I learned that firsthand with some of the environmental groups, some of the really contentious environmental groups in Alabama. Go sit down with them, go paddle with them. That was, I paddled a couple of times with some of the environmental groups, and just an opportunity again to bump into somebody, to show them that they're human. And if you're hanging out with someone, there's a potential that you can influence them. the challenge there, or maybe the risk, is they might influence you back. And so you have to be careful that, is this really where we want to head? But be mindful, once you're influenced, then maybe you see another perspective. Maybe you do cause your organization to take a different path as you're planning that next project. And so I tried to create opportunities to bump into people myself. And now I try to create opportunities for my clients to bump into each other and bump into others. And, this photo on the bottom right, usually when someone shows up in shorts and sandals and with a camera lens as long as their beard, usually that's not a good thing on a construction site. But I invited Nelson Brook, the Black Warrior River Keeper. I invited him and a few other environmental advocates to come out onto my project and to stand over a creek at the bottom of a 30-acre watershed that we had completely cleared and working on a roadway. I wanted them to see what the quality of the water was. I wanted them to see the snails and the mussels still on the bottom, not covered with sediment after we had been working for 6 months. Now, a reporter up on the upper right there, I invited her down in the bottom left, Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, local regulators. I invited all these people to come to visit our projects when I was with ALDOT, just to bump into them, just to try to hang out with them so that we could have some influence. We don't get to decide whether or not we are seen as trustworthy in someone else's eyes. You guys, you don't know me. Any trust, well, I'll save that. So we don't get to decide. I don't get to decide whether or not you trust me. It's through my actions, through your observations of my actions. And so building up that trust, honesty, transparency, empathy, courage, inspiration, all of those things are required for me to build up trust in your mind. And that starts with expectation. And so one thing I've learned about expectation is when we're skeptical, our ears close a little bit. When we're cynical, we become deaf. And so as we're interacting with people, before we go hang out with them, we need to check ourselves. And are we walking into this situation deaf, being cynics, or are we skeptical? Are we a little nervous? And a little skepticism isn't bad, but just know that it's closing your ears up a little bit. And so when we condition ourselves with different TV media and radio media, we can slowly close our ears up. And once if you're proud of the fact that you're a cynic, just know that you're deaf, that you're headed in your direction, and that may not be a great thing for you. So this book, Talking to Strangers, I read that one actually when I was out visiting my mom. Malcolm Gladwell, he makes the case that we really stink at judging people, that we as citizens, we as even judges, people with the name judge or a title judge, are bad at judging people. Our CIA, the spy agencies, he gives example after example of them being wrong about judging whoever they were judging. Police officers have such a hard role to play, and they're terrible at judging people. And so you put, and I'm not saying that to be critical. We need, and Malcolm Gladwell makes the case that we need police officers to make snap decisions. We need them to be a little bit on edge about, things that they've experienced for our own security. But we also have to be careful. We have to be mindful that we are just simply bad at judging people. And so I like this first point, first assume positive intent. Now I'm not talking about police officers. I would hate to be in that position, of police officer, or judge, someone that has to make a snap judgment about someone's character, and it's a matter of life and death. I'm not in that position. I can judge with the best of us, but it's typically not a life and death situation that I'm struggling with there. So first, assume positive intent. Someone offends you, hey, maybe they didn't mean it that way. Let's give them one more chance. Offer grace, be consistent, become a partner, communicate reality. Let's talk about the facts here if we can. Leveraging endorsement. This is getting to being trustworthy. You guys, you know, you didn't know me when you showed up this morning. I was leveraging the endorsement of the planners and of John Hart that I was going to give you a decent talk this morning, and you trusted that. And maybe if there's anyone to blame, it's John. I'll just say that. John Maxwell says, every time you speak to people, give them something to feel, something to remember, something to do. And so when I invited this community outreach group to visit one of our projects, it's at the end of the tour. And you know, there's a track coat sitting there, and I'm thinking, I bet these folks have never had their picture taken in a track coat bucket. And they probably haven't since, but you know, they felt something, and they probably still remember that, especially if they run across this photo every once in a while. And so we have to think about what would make our potential listener, what would help them. You know, the 5 pillars, it gives people something to think about, something to do, something to remember. It gives them maybe gives them some hope that there maybe is a solution out there. And you know, one of the challenges with creating something like the 5 pillars or an approach is make it memorable, make it portable. And I would, you know, prove to myself that it was actually portable. I could take that construction stormwater application and apply it in a post-construction setting with just a little bit of a tweak. So we developed mantras to go along with the 5 pillars. And so you guys help me shout out, what do you think? Which pillar does green is good go with? The green one. Manage erosion. All right. How about contractors can do anything we ask them to? Manage work. All right. So what are the 2 things contractors need us to do in order to do anything we ask them to? We need to tell them up front and be willing to pay for it. Yeah. So that's managing work. The best management practice, communication. Okay. This is a fun one that I like to use. What is dumb? We get to tell it where to go and how fast to get there. Water. So I preach that water is dumb, folks. If it's doing bad things, it's our fault. We get to tell it where to go and how fast to get there. What control alone is ineffective? Sediment control alone is ineffective. And there was a time at Aldite when we were dredging ponds, we were dredging rivers, we were dredging sloughs. And so another mantra was dredging sucks, and that was referring to sediment. So managing communication, we talked about the definition there. Some of the control measures associated with managing communication, they're not exactly what you might think. It's not just talking to people. It's, hey, contractor, this piece of paper says you will do this amount of work in this way for this amount of money. That's communication. Some of the best management practices that go along with those measures. And please, I'm running through this a little faster than I thought I would. If you need any more information on the 5 pillars, particularly communication, just do a search for 5 pillars Fagan, and you can get 5 pillars stuff, and I can help you out with best practices if you want to email me. So communication can look in a number of different ways out on a construction site. Even in post-construction, I mentioned the ASC stormwater infrastructure report. I didn't hear anybody shout out your D- this morning. And I'm wondering, has that report been widely communicated to everyone that, you know, we have some stormwater infrastructure issues. And so we in Alabama, we put a lot of work into that, and I didn't want it to just sit on a shelf. So I've given probably 5 presentations to different types of groups about that report. Even had a Alabama Stormwater Association table talks event where we brought in not stormwater inspectors for an event, but city public works directors and city engineers and city managers and mayors, and talked about their issues. We used our infrastructure report as a basis for that conversation. And then we talked about what are your stormwater issues and where can you find funding to take care of those. some of the barriers to our communication efforts. They're external, they're internal. Those external are obvious. You know, one thing I do when I get a new phone is I turn the sound off immediately, right out of the box, turn the sound off. It never comes back on, because I don't want you to think, while we're talking, I don't want you to think that whatever spam call I'm getting is more important than our conversation. And then there are internal barriers to active listening. Remember, communication is what the listener does. I think the troublesome ones are those deep-rooted beliefs and the prejudgment, those things that we really don't even know we're carrying around sometimes within us, that we're born with, not born with, we're conditioned into having, but we don't even know that those barriers exist. And I think we just need to check ourselves sometimes. So, you know, one thing, once we do realize that we have an issue, another great philosopher, Dolly Parton, says we need to address that. She set a good example of that back last year. She had an issue at one of her theme parks, and someone said, "Hey, that's offensive." And she said, "You know, you're right." And she removed it and then said, "Hey, if you see something's a problem, fix it." So, so let's have a shout out if you're willing. So how has your organization's communication culture affected its employees? Any thoughts on your communication culture? And we are running a little bit shorter on time than I had hoped. The other question, how has your organization's communication culture and reputation affected its ability to fulfill its mission? So that's how has your organization stepped on its own toes when it comes to offending the people that it's serving? And then that's kind of coming back to haunt you. Maybe some questions there. I'll give you one more question, but just think about those questions there. How's your organization's communication culture affected its employees? How has your organization's communication culture affected its own ability to fulfill its mission? And then what can you do to help change that culture? So that's probably the bigger question we need to be asking ourselves is what can I do from where I'm sitting? And, you know, you may not be in a management position, you may not be in leadership, but I've realized that we can lead from wherever we happen to be sitting. We all do have a circle of influence around us, and we do have the ability to, it may be one or two people, but why not start with that one or two people and work on that? So checking yourself and then helping others out. That kayak coach was excellent at communicating. He taught me how to, he knew I had an issue being upside down in the water, pinned inside a boat. So he taught me how to get out when I needed to. We made some runs, and he was right there behind me, coaching me. When I would flip over, as soon as I popped out of the water, he's standing right there, letting me know that he's there with me. And I think we can do that for our employees also. Any thoughts on that before I share our last slide, as far as our communication culture and what we can do? Any shout outs, anything on your mind that you want everybody else to know? Okay, well, there's your opportunity. Okay, so I mentioned Katie, my oldest daughter. She got her undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering from Mississippi State, then went to Auburn and got her speech language pathology master's degree. And so now she's working in speech language pathology. And for a while there, she was working with severely handicapped kids. And that's what got her into speech language pathology. And this is Cade, one of the kids there at the center she worked at. And the device he has, she calls it a talker. I think there's a more scientific term for it, but she loves programming these talkers and seeing how it opens up these kids' worlds. You know, Cade has his mind is as good as yours or mine, but because of some disabilities, he can't communicate. He can't speak what's on his mind, whether he's mad, sad, happy, needs something, wants something. he can't physically get those words out, and that's what the talker's for. And I think we're in such a privileged position to be able to communicate when we need to communicate. If I don't like what's going on, I can speak out and say, I don't like what's going on. But we don't take advantage of that. So I would encourage you to realize what a privileged position we're in. Not only are we, individually able to do that, but we're living at a time that's more secure, more prosperous, more technologically advanced than any other time we've ever had on this planet. In spite of what you might hear or see in the news, it's a pretty good time to be alive. So I would encourage you to, if you've got hangups like I do about talking with people, hanging out with people, then I'd encourage you to get over that, because folks are what we need. We need that communication and collaboration to get things done around here. So one question. Yeah, well, John, are you going to ask for questions? Any questions or comments? Okay.
Anybody online? Any questions online? Barry, thank you so much for the presentation. This concludes the session. The next session will begin at 11:15. So again, if you haven't got your parking thing stamped, get it stamped so you don't have to pay for that. This ends the session. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.